Hey, welcome back. This week I wanted to take a little journey into the Waybackage and talk about an Old North recording actually that in a way is kind of timely because of an upcoming anniversary. So the North Project, kind of active from 1995 to 2008, if that's sort of how you define it. We were over that time kind of dropping recordings now and again as we went. The big one, of course, being this one, which was the the first full-length North record, which came out in 2008, Drowning in Sky. And when we released that, we also put out this bonus EP called Orange Lights, which I talked about back in episode 6, I believe, that was a limited edition run that came out with the album. If you turn the clock back a little further, then you start to get into these other EPs. That term, by the way, for those who don't know it, an EP stands for extended play. It's shorter than an LP, which is a long play or a full-length record, but longer than a single, right? So a single might be 1, 2 songs, maybe 3. A full-length album is usually 50, 60 minutes of music or more. And an EP would be somewhere in the middle, right? So we put out a couple of those along the way as well. This is a record called 5. Came out in 2001, has 5 tracks on it. And then, of course, the EP Revolutions came out in 1999, has 7 tracks on it. It's about 35 minutes long. So for most folks who were kind of following the North Project back when, they kind of think of this as the first North recording. And in a way it is, because this was really the first recording to feature the band, as it were, right? This is the first recording to have myself, Marcus, and Tom Sharp, the project's original percussionist, on it. And it kind of defined the folk rock, acoustic rock, the beginning of that kind of sound that sort of then carried the band forward into the years and productions that were going to come ahead of us. So what's interesting is that, for most people, they think of this as the first kind of North recording. But it wasn't until sort of a funny thing happened back in 2008 that I realized that how true that was in terms of people really thinking of this as the first North recording. It turns out that it's not. There are actually a couple of little bit different recordings that came out prior to Revolutions. The way I found out that most people didn't know about these was actually has to do with this record. Revolutions has a track on it called What God Wants. And What God Wants is actually a song that had been written a while before. And in the opening line of the song, I make reference to my age by saying how old I am. So what I had always done over the years was when I performed the song live, I always just sort of performed it saying whatever age I was at the time. And of course, when I recorded Revolutions, I recorded it with the age that I was at the time that the song was recorded, which in this case, I was 25. So that's the lyric that appears on this recording. So the funny thing that happened in 2008 was Marcus and I were hosting a little house concert. It was the 10th anniversary of our first ever real gig, so to speak. In March of 1998, we had a small gig opening for a friend on St. Patrick's Day. And so in 2008, on that same day, we hosted a little house concert for friends and, kind of longtime supporters of the group. Invited some musicians that we had played with over the years to join us and play as well. And at that little house concert, a good friend of mine came up and said, "Hey, I'd love to hear What God Wants tonight, and I'd love it if you could play it with the lyrics as originally recorded." So so I said to myself, "Oh wow, okay, so we're really throwing back here. Okay, I'll sing it with the opening line as originally recorded." So I went ahead, when that point in the set came, we played the song, and I opened up the song by singing the line that implied that I was 22, which is how old I was when the song was first recorded. And I remember looking out, across the living room to my friend who kind of gave me this look, and I realized that there was kind of a moment of disconnect there. And it occurred to me then that even this good friend who had been supporting the band for a long time probably didn't realize that Revolutions in 1999 was not the first recording of that song. So this kind of dawns on me that there's maybe some people out there who followed the North Project but weren't aware of the really early recordings that happened in the project. So if you turn the clock backwards now from 1999, you start to get into the years where there really wasn't a band yet. There wasn't if you get back into 1998, 1997, you're starting to get into periods of time now before Marcus was even involved with the project. So the project really had no full-time members yet other than myself. And at that time, North was a very kind of amorphous project. I had this idea that I wanted to have this project that would create music and release music, but there wasn't a clear direction, certainly no clear sound as far as even a genre as to where I wanted to go. So when you go back into those early years, you find some recordings that kind of indicate the very beginnings of the project and just how sort of open-ended it was. In 1996, this came out, and this is a recording I have to just make a video and explain this. It's a whole story in and of itself. This is actually a film soundtrack that was composed and recorded in 1996, and the story, it's such a long story, I'm just going to tell it in another video, but basically it was done under the North name, but it's just completely different from anything else that people would think of as a North recording. But the very first North recording is actually this one. So for those of you who are in the more modern generations, this is a cassette tape. This was recorded, I guess there were CDs back then, but they were much tougher to make than they are now. This is a little cassette tape called The Blueprint. And The Blueprint was made in 1995. It was released in November 1st, actually, of 1995. And it's a little recording that I put together. I had written some songs over the preceding couple of years, and I wanted to kind of sweep them in together and put out just something as an experiment, which is kind of the reason why it was named The Blueprint. It was sort of, the idea was that this was a recording that was kind of a sketch of a bigger thing to come. This was the first time that the North name was really used, was on this cassette, and it was really the beginning of the project in a way. It was my first foray into taking these songs which I had, played for friends or played at parties or, that kind of thing, and actually putting them down into a form where they could be distributed all by themselves as sort of commercial music, if you will. This tape sold for $5, and my policy was that if you took it home and didn't like it, you could give it back to me, and I'd give you the $5 back. So that was my first foray into release music. So this cassette was actually something of an accomplishment for its time. It's got a professionally printed label, although only on one side because it was cheaper that way. It does have what's called a J card. Whoops. Which is the printed material that goes inside a cassette case because it looks like a J. And in this case, it's even got a single fold-out panel for the J card, which was, a little extra. And it's what's called a 4/1 print because it's got full color on one side and black and white on the back. So this cassette has 6 songs on it, one of which was the original recording of What God Wants. And in that recording, I was 22, which is why when my friend said, "Could you please sing the song with the first line as originally recorded?" that's what I thought he meant. It didn't occur to me that he wasn't aware that this recording was out there. So this tape's kind of interesting. It's got 4 songs on it that were recorded with guitar and/or vocals, I should say some of them have vocals. They all have guitar. Those songs were actually recorded at a good friend's house, Will Van Kampen. He had a 4-track machine, and we actually put down those 4 songs with the 4-track. And on one of them, it was actually What God Wants. He added a bass and a vocal harmony part just kind of on his own while he was mixing it, and I liked it so much. I was like, yeah, we definitely got to keep this. Believe it or not, Will Van Campen is the first person other than me to ever appear on a North recording, even though he was never a full-time member of the project, so to speak. So those 4 guitar songs are on here, and that was sort of the beginning of the folk part of North sound. Also on here is a song called Ode to the Rain. It was actually written back in the late 80s, if you can imagine that. It's a piano-based song, and it was re-recorded. A new version of it was recorded and released on this EP in 2001, but the original version of it was a live cut that we had done in Solid Sound Studio. I was taking a class there at the time, and they literally just set up a couple of mics and sang and played through the song a couple of times, and we picked the best take, and it ended up on the tape. The 6th song on the recording was sort of my my original stake in the ground to claim that there was always going to be the potential for something weird on North recordings. It was an a cappella, single voice a cappella piece, actually kind of atonal and in free time. It was this weird project I had done for a composition class I was taking at the time. And I actually recorded it in the 7-story high stairwell of one of the dorms on campus. I went in there. I don't even know where I got the microphone. I must have borrowed it from somebody. I went in there with a microphone and a couple of cables and a component cassette deck like you would connect to a stereo, and under my arm. And I went into this dorm to the basement of this big, tall, echoey staircase and recorded a couple of takes of this tune. And one of them ended up on the blueprint. And one of my favorite points in the recording is there's a moment in the song where a U of M bus actually stops outside on the street, and I guess one of the windows was open or something, and the squeak of this bus's brakes like comes into the song at like this perfect moment. So it's a really, really kind of crazy and fun recording, and definitely a piece of history. So what I'd really like to do is, it being 2015, this coming November will be the 20th anniversary of this blueprint recording. So as it occurs to me that there's a lot of North fans and friends who maybe don't know that this recording exists, I'd love to do a digital version of it. I'd like to try to sweep together some funds from the Patreon campaign, and if I can put enough of them together, I'd like to get this digitally mastered. I got to find the original cassette that I used to put the songs together. I have a studio in mind. I don't think it'll be too expensive, but I will need some support to pull some money together and get that remastered. And then I'd like to release it. I have the original artwork, I think, still in digital form, so I can put a nice package together that's got the blueprint artwork, all the liner notes, cheesy as they are, from 1995, and remaster the recordings and let folks hear kind of how North started, how the project started. And a lot of the recordings are rough, right? You've got 4-track stuff, you got stuff recorded on cassette, there's going to be a lot of tape noise. Even the performances, were kind of as best that I could do at the time, and things like that. But I think it's just a neat piece of history that I'd like to share with people. So I'm hoping I can put that together. If you're not familiar with the Patreon campaign, there are links all over the place for it. At the end of the video, you'll see a link that says support. You can follow that. The way that works, in case you're not familiar with it, is you just pledge any amount you want. It can be 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, and that pledge is made per insider's release. And an insider's release is a special track or a live cut from the past or something kind of unique that I share with people. I aim to do about one a month, somewhere between 10 and 15 a year is kind of the pace I'd like to keep. And every time an insider's release comes out, those pledges come in, and a portion of those funds goes to Patreon, of course, a portion goes to paying off the Drowning in Sky record from 2008, and then another substantial portion goes to piling up funds for new projects. So I'd really like to see if I can get enough funds together to put the blueprint out. So if you have any other questions about this recording, if you're curious about it, the other tracks on it, some of them did get re-recorded and some did not. Certainly feel free to shoot me a line, drop a comment. I'm always looking for that. If you have one of these, by the way, I'd really like to know, inside the J card, on the liner notes on the inside, in the upper right-hand corner, I put a serial number by hand. This is serial number 001. There were only about 100 of these made. So on the off chance you happen to be one of the few people out there who has this cassette, I'd actually love to know what serial number you've got, because there can't be too many of these out there still floating around. Most people have thrown out all their cassettes by now. But anyway, we'd love to hear from you with any questions or comments. Thanks again for listening, and talk to you next week.